yourself the gerbil to stop?
Ethan, first of all, does it offend you if we call you gerbil? Because I called you gerbil yesterday. I meant to ask you yesterday. I'm sorry.
I won't make any more
You've
noise.
already asked me if it offends him like 4 times.
I don't make any more noise.
Okay. Alright, welcome Jamie, Quentin, and Brecken if you were watching this. So my class has shrunk by half of it. Alright, so your homework last night was to only do the Write About It paper, so hopefully you put some good substantial effort into it for you. So this is the format that I want.
You dropped.
This
It
is
hit like
the
a pound of
format.
bricks. Why did it hit like that?
I don't know. This is the format that I want for it. So Jamie, I'll send you a copy. Quentin and Brecken, I'll give yours to you. If you come back tomorrow, I'll give it back to you tomorrow or the next day. If not, I'll just go ahead and
Can you
email
give
it.
the gerbil one
Wait,
on
stop.
the
What? Yeah. Raise your hand.
Can I do
Raise your
one?
hand. Yes.
Can I get the one that didn't fall on the thing? Can I just copy and paste this and use this?
No, because, so for this one, this is a good example to show you how the format is. So, you'll notice in the heading, it says write about it. And then I put which write about it I did for this one. So chapter 16, number 1. Is that one that you are supposed to do?
Huh?
Chapter 16, number 1. Is that one you're supposed to do?
Yes.
Is it?
No.
It's not. I picked one on purpose
What?
that I knew that none of you could do.
What?
So that way you wouldn't copy my paper.
Oh.
So,
Really?
yeah, for real. I did it on purpose.
How
Alright,
when did you write this?
last night.
And you just bust out a cool 300 words real quick?
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, I did
It's light
it in
work.
college and stuff as well.
Yeah.
So it's one of
How
those
long did it
like,
take you?
all it said about 40 minutes this week.
Just bust out like 300 word paper real quick, easy.
Alright, look over on page 231, so you can see like the formatting. So again, Jamie, Quentin, and Brett, I'm going to flip slides really quick for you. So for this one, again, 300, 400 words, well written, use facts or text, most students written presentation, we'll come back to that. Format, so again, whenever I'm checking format, I will literally take this paper, put it on top of your paper, and hold it up to the light to see, okay, are all of your spacing in the correct spot? Do you have single spacing? Do you have double spacing? Do you have proper indent? This is the fastest way to do it. What?
Why isn't this working?
Because you have a thick notebook in the back. If it's a single piece of paper.
Oh, I see.
But yeah, so I'll show you how to set it up like this on the format in just a second. But again, so Times New Roman fonts. So again, I can tell if you didn't do it in Times New Roman, 12-point font, double space, no after spacing. That is a huge thing. Most people forget to turn that off. I'll show you how to turn it off in a second. Heading at the top of the paper, this is the heading I want. So write about it. Chapter 16, if you choose that one, number 2. Or you can do chapter 17, number 1.
Chapter
Either one.
16 of the-
No, you can't take mine. I chose this one on purpose so that way you can't see it.
Is it perjury if we use it?
You're gonna get a 0 because it's wrong. It's not the right write about it. So the second part, second line of the heading is your name. That means write your name. So your name is what, Chris?
Benedict Arnold.
Is that your real name?
Christopher Whitley.
What's my
You
name?
can have that. That's fine. You can write off your full name if you want to.
Ethan
But basically,
Hitler.
I just want
Adolf Hitler.
Ethan. What's your real name? So there you go. So I want your name. The date, the final draft will be due for this next Tuesday. I gotta get it in before exams start, and no one wants to worry about the paper during the exam. So it's coming. You have 1 week from today.
Can I make my name Mein Kampf?
No, you have to write your actual name because I'm grading it. So
Okay,
write
so
your
write-
name.
write
Your
about
name
a
is
chapter
fine. Hang on,
16.
hang on. I can't focus too many people. Okay, Chris, finish your
Write
question.
about it, chapter 17, number Mein Kampf.
No, no. Just stick with regular English and then numerical.
You know what Mein Kampf is?
That sounds like mine struggle.
Mein Kampf, written by Hitler.
It's
My
that's why I said my struggle. Okay. Okay, Genesis, did you have a question? Okay. Alright, so showing you how to set this up in the format now in case you don't know, because I showed it to junior high and some of them still missed it. So I'm gonna show you how
It's junior high.
I'm gonna show you how to do it so that way you will be able to set it up correctly for you and your own. Most of you did pretty well on the essay. So that's the reason why I want to show you this one really quick. Alright, if I already told Ethan to stop making sounds, that probably means you should stop as well. Alright, so looking over here for this one. Alright, I'm gonna have to stand over here. I'm gonna make sure
I like
Jamie,
it.
Quentin, everyone can see it. Zoom in. Oh, y'all were all in the shot just now.
Oh!
Sorry. Alright,
I'm filing for a lawsuit.
alright.
Can you blur out my face, please?
Well, as long as you didn't turn around and look at it, fine.
I did.
Alright, so how do you set this up for it? I'm gonna turn on the parenthetical marks for it. Alright, so for this top section, it's centered, so make sure you know how to center it. Is anyone not to know how to center.
Control.
Yeah, so you highlight it. If you press Control L, it'll shift over to the left. Control R, shift to the right. But I want Control E, shift to the center. So that's how you center. He should have no idea how to do that.
I know all my controls. Yeah, right.
Yay! All right, so
What are those three things under it?
this means paragraph.
Paragraph.
So if you take away, okay. So if it looks like this,
How did you get those paragraph things there?
Stop. Wait.
Cool.
All right. So you go over into paragraph. You go into single spacing. This should say 0. I believe it starts off at 10 or 6 whenever you first turn it on. This should say 0. What should that say, Ethan?
My God.
My God.
What should it say?
Zero.
What should it say?
0.
What should it say, Genesis?
That really took that much brain.
0. So because of that, if I look at your spacing, I know, there's something weird between your paragraphs. That means, that means you left it on, and I would dot points off for it. So that's how I tell. You can see how for mine, come back over, that way Brecken, Quentin, and Jamie can all see it. That for mine, that there is no weird spacing. It looks all the same from the very top to the very bottom. Even when I started a new paragraph, there's no weird awkward space. If spacing is turned on, there's going to be a little bit of extra space there, and that's how that tells me you left on after spacing. So turn it off, otherwise I will know for it. All right. To go back to turn on the marks, Chris, do you see this little bitty funky symbol at the top of the page? Okay, you turn that on. If you click on it, all the little dots appear on it, and so it's telling you where you have paragraphs. So enter, enter, enter.
Does every computer come with that? Because I have a gaming PC that I built myself, and I don't know if it has Word on it. I don't use my dad's laptop.
If it has Word, this is a Word, this is an older version.
I have
of Word.
Microsoft 10 or Windows 10 or something.
It should have. Does it have Word on it?
That's what I'm asking. Should it?
Okay, there's Microsoft 10, there's the Windows 10 operating system, then there's all of the versions of Word, Excel, PowerPoint. There's 7, 2010, 2016, I believe, and then they switched to 365 because they're for the year. That's not gonna you have to buy a subscription for it now.
Oh, yeah, you have to buy it. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not sure again which one you have.
I have a pirated version. I'm joking.
This is going online, so I
I'm
don't know if you want that documented. So, because of that, you want to be careful with your 3 spaces. So how many spaces should be there, Genesis? 3. How many, Chris? 3. How many, Ethan? 3. You know how I'm going to... Okay, make sure you focus. You know how I'm going to check that? I'm going to take this piece of paper, put it over your piece of paper, and see, do the spaces match up? If the spaces don't match up, points off because you don't have the proper spacing. Alright, anyone have any questions about how to do that?
Do you see my knuckles?
Do you have any questions about how to do that? Okay, so, body of the paper should be what type of spacing, Genesis? Double space. So, you highlight the whole body of your paper, you click right on it, paragraph, you change it to double, and now that'll jump it down. This is right at 300 words, it's 311. I actually wrote it down on the bottom of the page for you, so that way you can see how many there are. So, if you tell me, I wrote 400 words, and you're in the middle of this first page, I know you're lying. So, make sure that you want to try to shoot for the bottom of the page as much as you can, so that you know, okay, I'm close for it. Alright.
There's an easier way to double space.
Okay.
So, if you go up, see where that yellow thing is, where you would center it normally? Go over right, click that,
Okay.
and then put on 2.
Alright, so...
That's what I did.
Alright, alright, so if you click on it, I don't think that turns off after spacing. Maybe that's
It
where
doesn't get to turn off after spacing.
So make sure.
That's easier than highlighting both, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but just okay, well keep in mind though, because up here is single space.
Oh.
So just be careful that you're going through it. So again, be careful. So you know what you're doing? Cool, but just be careful because up here, if you double space the whole thing, I'm gonna see it awkward space up here and I'll know what you did. So just make sure that you know what you're doing. Either grab part of it and then click double space, and be sure to turn off after spacing as well. Alright, anyone have any questions though? But that's a good
very
point.
uncomfortable.
Why?
Don't look at me. Alright, does anyone have any questions about how to set it up?
No.
Alright, look over in your textbook so that way sometimes we can go over the parts for it. We're not done. Look over on page 231. Alright, so the right about it. Imagine you were in a group of sightseers gathered in 1861 at Centreville Heights, 5 miles away from the small town of Manassas. You watch the Union troops as they fight the Confederate Army in the First Battle Bull Run. Okay, there are 3 basically parts to it in the next section. So it's asking you, what are your expectations. Are you surprised at the outcome of the battle? And explain your answer. So that's kind of like the same idea, and that'll be part of the grade saying, okay, did you include all the parts of the question in your paper? So if you read through it, you don't have to read through it right now. But if you read through it, I basically explain, okay, what do I think, like, what's happening? What do I think's gonna happen, and why do I think that? So again, you want to go through to say, okay, what are the different questions? Did I answer everything? Did I explain everything? Also, all the information I got for this, I got just from my book. I didn't go online or do any other type of information. I just pulled it straight out of the textbook. So, does anyone have any questions about how to write the paper? Anyone have any questions about what needs to be in the paper? Anyone have any questions about how to format the paper? Alright, Ethan, you got any questions? You wanna make sure? Chris, you got any questions? You wanna make sure? Jason, you got any questions? You wanna make sure? Alright, final draft is due next Tuesday because exams start when, Ethan? I'm sorry, Chris.
I feel offended.
What?
I feel offended
I'm
that
sorry,
she
Chris.
would compare me to such a book.
I'm sorry, the wrong name just came out. Okay.
Next week.
When? Do you know what day?
Tuesday.
Nope. Wednesday. So I want to have the papers done before your exam starts. That's why it's gotta be next Tuesday. Are you distracting people, Chris? It looks
He's
like
distracting me, he's looking at me, slurping on a drink like a
Turn
turtle.
around. Turn around. And Chris, stop crossing your eyes and looking at people. Alright, so you don't have any questions about it. Alright, so I want to go ahead and I want to get into it. We'll review more at the end because I'm tired of being stuck in the same section. So I want to go ahead and move on from it. Alright, so go ahead and get out your textbook.
I'll be there.
Yay! Turn over to page number, we left off kind of talking about page 125. A couple of days ago, I skipped the video on the Battle of Gettysburg because I was worried about not making time, and then I realized when the exam fell, and then I realized I have tons of time now, so it doesn't matter anymore. So, because of that, we're gonna go back and watch it.
God bless you.
Thank you. Alright, so, what was important about the Battle of Gettysburg? Anyone remember? Right?
It was in Gettysburg. No, I'm joking. It was the turning point.
It was a turning point. It was also the most decisive battle. What speech was written after the Battle of Gettysburg to help commemorate it?
Gettysburg Address.
Gettysburg
The
Address.
13th Amendment.
No. Alright, so Gettysburg Address. We're gonna watch this quick video. Genesis, do you want to get the lights?
Mayflower
Okay,
Congress.
Genesis is not good. Chris, you may get the lights.
What kind of?
Alright,
Yeah.
so this one is about the Civil War and with Gettysburg Address. So keep in mind though, we don't have a whole lot of time. I don't know if that actually showed up or not in the video. So that is, so we don't have a whole lot of time over and over and over again. Okay, now you did. So just be careful.
They saw my forehead.
It's not recording in front of your eyes. Alright,
Yeah,
so keep in mind, no talking during the video, so that way we can get through this. Jamie, Quentin, and Brecken, I'm sorry, I don't think they show up very well, and I'm sorry to speak up, but you can find them on YouTube if you need to. Oh, that's right. Okay, for you. So, make sure if you have a question, raise your hand. I don't have a whole lot of time.
How long is this video?
About 4 minutes, actually.
Doing another video after this?
Yep.
And another one after that?
Hopefully it helps.
In June of 1863, Confederate General Robert E. Lee took his Army of Northern Virginia into the North for the second time. The Union commander, George Gordon Meade, was in pursuit. They would ultimately bump into each other here at Gettysburg. Behind me is the town of Gettysburg, around which the Battle of Gettysburg will be fought. The Battle of Gettysburg started by accident. Literally, troops bumped into each other. General Lee heard that Meade was pursuing him, and Lee concentrated his army. The Union vanguard is already here as well, and they're banging each other north and west of town on McPherson's Ridge. It's an intense fight. Ultimately, the fight will grow until north of town. You're going to have the Union 11th Corps fighting against the Corps under a guy named Richard Ewell. In the end, you're going to have 30,000 Confederates outflanked and with 18,000 Union troops who retreat back through town to Cemetery Hill and to Culp's Hill, where we stand now. And for the next 24 hours, all that happens is that both.
There's how many that flanked?
Flanked,
It said 18,000, so I was like, did it say like 2,000 flanked to beat the 18,000?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I was thinking about something else at the moment. I'm sorry.
Sides bring the remainder of their troops here until the Yankees have maybe 90,000 troops and the Southerners have maybe 70,000 troops. And the Yankees form in the shape of a fishhook. And we are right here on this fishhook at the end of Culp's Hill here. The Union line will continue along Cemetery Hill behind me, Cemetery Ridge, and eventually end over on Little Round Top. The Southerners line up around that line, basically formed on the most distant tree line you can see way off in the distance, okay? If General Lee needs to go from one side of his army to the other, it's 6 miles. Meade only has to go 2.5. Meade is also on the defensive. Meade has more men on a more compact line, and Lee is more strung out, and Meade finally has the home field advantage. On the second day of the battle, Robert E. Lee decided to take 20,000 troops under James Longstreet and attack the Union left, and take maybe 5,000 to 10,000 and attack Culp's Hill. But the attack on the Union left flank took place first. The Southerners are going to have to get over there without being seen opposite the Union line. Ultimately, the Southern line will attack what's called an echelon, where a couple of brigades move in, and then a couple more, and ultimately, Longstreet's men will make fierce attacks. First they'll fight at Devil's Bend and Little Round Top, and then onto the wheat field. And then they actually have found a gap in the middle of the Union line, troops that had gone to reinforce some of the fighting in other areas, but the Confederates can't quite push through it, because wherever they show up, Union reinforcements from inside Meade's strong official position arrive and push the Southerners back. Ultimately, the bloodiest fighting at Gettysburg, the second day on the south end, will come to a close without a decisive result. And while Longstreet is attacking the Union left flank, the Confederates are beginning a huge artillery bombardment on the Union right flank, here on Culp's Hill. That bombardment wouldn't do anything. The Confederate attack doesn't come for long, until long after, actually, the fighting on the Union left flank is mostly over. Ultimately, the Southerners will try to attack East Cemetery Hill. They capture part of East Cemetery Hill. They capture 9 cannons. This is the key Union position at East Cemetery Hill, and it's about to fall to the Confederates. But again, Union reinforcements push the Confederates back. Confederates have a little bit more success here on Culp's Hill. Culp's Hill consists of 2 hills, an upper hill and a lower hill. This is night fighting, very odd with Civil War. The Confederates easily capture the lower hill, but they're unable to capture the pinnacle of Culp's Hill. The next day, the fighting resumes, where the Confederates try to capture Upper Culp's Hill. The Yankees return with even more reinforcements, not only recapturing their old trenches in Lower Culp's Hill that they had lost, but maintaining their possession of Upper Culp's Hill. On the third day, having already tested the Union left flank and the Union right flank, the Confederates opted to attack the Union center, and this is what we now know as Pickett's Charge. Pickett's Charge is going to take place in the fields behind me, and on the afternoon of July 3rd, you're eventually going to have a great moan go up from the Union line. This is after a huge artillery bombardment, but the moan comes not from that, but rather from the beauty and pageantry of a great Confederate assault. 12,000 troops advancing across that field, you can see over my shoulder. The Yankees decimated their long-range artillery, and as they reached the road, Union reinforcements poured into the area. The Union flank bulged out, and the Confederates are going to get flanked, but nonetheless, they push on impetuously, gain some of the key stone along the area. The Yankees are able to, however, push them back. 6,000 of the 12,000 soldiers who made the attack were killed, wounded, or captured. Lee lost 23 battle flags in that attack, more than he'd lost up to that point in the war combined. Robert E. Lee horribly failed in Pickett's Charge, but the next day he still stayed here through the rain across the field, faced George Gordon Meade, said, "Come on, Meade, attack me." Meade did not take the bait. That night, Robert E. Lee pulled back through the mountains. 9 days later, escapes back into Virginia, and the Civil War goes on for almost 2 more years.
So, they went into a lot more detail than your textbooks did, but again, your textbook is trying to basically condense a whole lot of history into just a couple of pages. Your textbook is slightly over about 500 pages, so that's how come your textbook is already long enough, and so that's because they had to just condense down as much information as possible. But you could spend a lot of your life studying this. Does anyone think they know why they like studying like the Civil War battlefields in particular? Alright, let me ask this way. How many wars have been fought on American
0. There's
soil?
only been 1 that's fought on American soil, it's the Civil War, the Revolutionary War. 2. Revolutionary
Yep,
War.
Revolutionary War.
Three,
So,
1812.
what?
3, 1812. War of 1812.
In the war.
Oh,
in
yeah,
Texas
that
War.
has to happen as well. So because of that, there's
Texas
not that many
independence.
wars that fought for us. Texas independence was more of a Texas at that time period, but yeah, it's part of us now today though. So that's probably the reason why I say, okay, this is battles that took place in a lot of sections, and we don't have a lot of wars to study, and particularly it was American strategy versus American strategy. I think a lot of people like to study it, because it's one of those where it is interesting, and it's okay to study it. There's a lot of different applications for it. Alright, any questions about the video? Again, you could spend a lot of time studying any of these battles, we just don't have time in the class. Alright, your book also references with the end of the Civil War. Now remember, what is the official ending date for the Civil War?
April 9th.
What was your name?
April 9, 1865.
Good job. Remember where, Chris? Turn the lights in a second. I just want to
Appomattox.
get this for like the videos. What?
Appomattox.
Appomattox Courthouse. Remember who surrendered Genesis? Robert E. Lee. So your book points out, I put it at the top of the page, that even though Lee surrendered, the Civil War wasn't quite over. The final people to surrender was General Stan Waddy and his Cherokee troops. And so they were actually the last group to surrender. So I have a video about them as well. So we don't talk about the Cherokee a whole lot. But keep in mind, what are the Cherokee known for in the textbook?
Being an Indian.
Okay, and what else? They're an Indian nation, but what happened to them that we talk about?
Trail of Tears.
The Trail of Tears. And so that's one reason why it's kind of interesting to talk about them. Oh, I should unlink it. Let me go.
How long is this?
About 2 minutes.
It was June 23rd, 1865. Brigadier General and Cherokee citizen Stan Wadey signed a ceasefire agreement from his post in Doaksville in the Choctaw Nation. With his signature, Wadey became the last Confederate general to surrender from the field at the end of the American Civil War. 150 years later, archivists at Northeastern State University in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, stumbled upon the handwritten ceasefire hidden away in a folder inside a box labeled Indian Correspondence.
I looked through that folder a little, but never really got deep into it. And there was a page in it that looked different. It was fancier paper and it had a ribbon at the top. And so I just pulled it out because it just didn't look like the other materials that were in there. When I flipped it over, there were a lot of signatures on the back page, including Wadey's and a couple others. On the left of the document was the date June 23rd, 1865.
I was super excited and my eyes filled up with tears. I was like, this is it. I think this is it.
You're looking at a treaty that ended the Civil War.
Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union forces on March 29, 1865, but historians say the Civil War officially ended for the Cherokee Nation when Wadey signed this treaty and his unit of Confederate, Cherokee, Osage Creek, and Seminole Indians disbanded.
After the collapse of the Confederacy, Wadey held out some longer, and it wasn't until 2 months after Lee surrendered that Wadey came to terms with the federal government and negotiated a treaty that Blaine found.
Before his surrender, General Wadey was part of several Civil War battles and raids, including one that sunk the J.R. Williams riverboat that was bringing supplies to Fort Gibson, Oklahoma. After the war, Wadey represented the Cherokee Nation as a delegate to Washington, D.C. He died in 1871.
Alright, Chris, can you get the light for me? Thank you. Alright, anyone have any questions about that? So again, it's just kind of interesting to talk about different nationalities of people that are in America in this time period. Alright, so we left off talking about the 13th Amendment. Why is the 13th Amendment? Alright, so why is the 13th Amendment different from the Emancipation Proclamation? Eden.
Involves slavery.
Okay, so what's different about them?
And the norm.
What?
Involves slavery and norm.
And the norm, and also all areas underneath its jurisdiction. So the 13th Amendment abolished slavery everywhere in the United States and in all of their territories, while the Emancipation Proclamation just freed them just in the states in rebellion, as Lincoln called them. Alright, so we also talked about Lincoln's re-election. Now remember, what was the party that formed around Lincoln? Because remember, they're all theoretically Republicans, but what was the group that formed around Lincoln in particular? Jizzes, do you remember? Yeah, good for a chance. Jizzes, you remember? Okay.
National Union Party.
Good, make it
I have a
up then.
question.
Okay.
So with the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln, he did that, but technically the slaves weren't really free yet, weren't they? Because
Well, keep in mind, did the southern states, did they view Lincoln as their president? No, so it doesn't matter what Lincoln says? No. So that's probably the reason as to how come the South basically said, oh, okay, like, we don't care. I mean, you can say whatever you want, you're not our president. But as the North went through it, as they found slavery in the South, they would free the slaves at that point, if it was in states under Confederacy. Alright, so, now keep in mind, who was the vice president for Abraham Lincoln? Because it's about to be really important. Johnson, make a note, so Andrew Johnson for him. Alright, economic effects of the war. It hurt both sides of the country. It hurt one side in particular more. What side do you think it hurt? What side of the country do you think it hurt worse? North or the South?
South.
The South. So, your book points out, in the North, they had new factories being built, and production increased. Now, of course, with loss of lives, and of course, yeah, it does affect it. Most of the fighting took place in the southern states, and so because of that, hard times in the South were particularly affected. Your book points out it takes the South about 20 years to just recover. We're going to talk about the Reconstruction, but they did not catch up agriculture-wise for many more years. But it was in the idea of South is going to be struggling for a while. Yes, Chris?
So you're saying if you owned a funeral home, you're in business?
If you were still alive, because a lot of people died. Now keep in mind, in the South in particular, if you were Caucasian, then because of that, you were more prone to be sent off to go fight, just because there wasn't a lot of Caucasian Americans in the South, because most of the African Americans in the South of this time period were slaves, so they wouldn't allow them to go fight because they didn't trust them.
All of them.
It's a good. I don't know if I could say indefinitely every single one, but it was definitely like 99% of the slaves in this. None of the African American people in the South were slaves in this time period. Okay.
What happened that made, not necessarily slavery, but like segregation come back up in the 60s, or was it always there?
It starts up at the end of the Civil War. We're gonna see how the North was bitter towards the South, so they did some things on purpose to try to offend the Southerners.
It just skyrocketed.
Yeah, it just kept going. So by 1960s,
Right.
they decided. Hang on a second. They decided in 1960s, enough's enough. This needs to end. Segregation needs to end. All of this needs to end. It needs to stop. So that's whenever they said, okay, this is getting ridiculous. It's been over 100 years. This needs to go away. And so.
And then whenever Rodney King happened, then it just blew up even more.
So as part of it, now keep in mind with Martin Luther King Jr., that's whenever he was kind of more like promoting it as well, and then that happened. And so again, 1960s whenever it's more known for the civil unrest, just because that's whenever they said, okay, enough's enough. It's been over 100 years. We shouldn't have it still.
When was Rodney King? Do you know when that was?
I don't remember the top of my head. I'm sorry. Like I recognize the person, but I can't remember exactly what he did or what he
That
was
caused
involved
worse
with.
protests than we saw last year. And then my grandfather, he's like the biggest non-slave African I've ever met in my life. He hates like the whole idea. And he was alive when segregation was.
Yeah, my mom remembers it. Now she was really little, like so there's not a lot of events, but she does remember it. And so it's one of those that's really sad that it stuck around for that long in our country.
And he said that the protests that we see today are nothing compared to what he's seen.
Keep in mind that it's one of those. Slavery is definitely wrong, and then also racism is wrong as well. To judge someone just on the idea.
It's kind of a whole different subject in itself. I think people naturally like group the racism and slavery together when I think they're two completely different subjects.
It's the idea of two different mindsets. I think everyone acknowledges. Okay, there's always some crazy person, but everyone pretty much today acknowledges that slavery is wrong in America. And racism is more of a stereotypical mindset that people just get into, and they don't even realize it in some cases. And so you have to you have to in some cases actively work to not take those stereotypes and apply them to all people groups all the time. So it's one of the things you have to kind of actively work on it. Alright, so look over though on page 226, so tragedy and triumph. So your book points out there was a lot of death, and then also it points out on page 226 on just the figures of human life being lost, with over 600,000 Americans dying. That doesn't count all the people that lost arms or legs, because remember this was the practice of the time, was to just cut it off. And so that does not factor into all the permanently disabled and maimed individuals for it. Unfortunately, an event happened on April 14th in 1865 that drastically probably altered America's history from this point forward, because I think personally it would have greatly helped out to have Abraham Lincoln as a president during this time period. But unfortunately, someone else decided that he was not a good president. They were going to take matters into their own hands. Alright, who assassinated Abraham Lincoln? Ethan.
Booth.
Good job. So John Wilkes Booth, making Abraham Lincoln and his wife and some friends, they went to a theater to go see a play, which is kind of like seeing a movie back in the time period. Basically, they just wanted to relax. The war was over. They were tired. They just wanted to have just a good evening and a good time. And John Wilkes Booth, he assassinated Abraham Lincoln. We're gonna watch a video about this in a second. So, but he assassinated. Now he was pro-Confederate. He was in support of the Confederacy. He thought that he would be recognized as a hero and the South would rise again. The Southern generals and the Southern people that found out about it were horrified, and they acknowledged, "You're basically crazy. Why would you do this to us?" Because they realized Abraham Lincoln was going to be very supportive of the South coming back into it. Abraham Lincoln was going to be very, very lenient. Lincoln had already said things making it clear that he wanted the South to come back into the Union as quickly and as painlessly as possible. And then John Wilkes Booth went ahead and assassinated him anyway. We think it was part of a conspiracy to assassinate several other leaders based on Booth's writing and several other correspondence of the time period with it. He had a couple of people that were supposed to help him go assassinate other key Union like leadership. It didn't happen though, so that was good. Andrew Johnson was apparently supposed to be assassinated too, but it didn't happen. And then Secretary of State Seward was wounded, but he survived. Alright, Lincoln though unfortunately died from this, and Andrew Johnson becomes president. Now keep in mind, which people are in charge of Congress during this time period? Chris? The Union. And so the Union, or the congressmen, they don't have the Southern senators and House of Representatives in Congress because the South pulled out. So it's Union that is just making the laws, and they decide that they want to stick it to the South and basically punish them for what has happened. Lincoln was probably a strong enough president to guide the Congress away from this, but they do not respect Andrew Johnson. We're going to see this in the next chapter, that they don't really care what Andrew Johnson said, even though Andrew Johnson is trying to follow Abraham Lincoln's wishes, they don't really care. You're not Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln is dead, and it's the South's fault, and that's where a lot of their grief comes from. Alright, look at the quote of Abraham Lincoln at the top of the page, and then watch the video about it. Alright, who wants to read the quote from page 227? Ethan, we'll let you do it. 227, it's the block quote right above the 16.4.
The will of God prevails in the present civil war. It is quite possible that God's purpose is something different from the purpose of either party, and yet human instrumentalities working just as they do are of the best adapted to effect his purpose.
So he's saying there that he thinks that God had a greater plan to basically strengthen the whole country by getting rid of slavery and forcing the nation to develop more of an industrial based industry as opposed to just agriculture. Overall, that's better for a country in general. So Abraham Lincoln is saying maybe God planned and used those horrible circumstances of the war to go ahead and get rid of slavery and to go ahead and make our nation switch over to more of industry. Maybe it's better for our country overall as opposed to just being stuck like this. And so that's what Abraham Lincoln is talking about, saying, you know, it's the will of God, and it's unfortunate that this horrible thing occurred, but it'll make our country stronger. Alright, this video is fairly short as well. So again, keep in mind, if you have questions, raise your hand.
The Lincolns and their guests arrive at Ford's in high spirits.
How long is this video?
About 3 minutes.
Can you move down?
The crowd applauds the president. They stop the play. They sit down, and the play begins.
Comes to them barking up the wrong tree about the old.
About 10 minutes after 10, Booth began to mount the stairs leading up to the second tier of boxes, where you would find President Lincoln.
As Booth makes his way toward the presidential box, he is seen, but no one stops him.
He was well known to everyone, a popular actor, of course, and that made Booth get right behind Lincoln.
Booth is in position at Ford's.
Booth comes into the box right as the whole theater bursts into laughter.
As the crowd roars with laughter, Booth takes aim.
To that moment where the whole future looked like had finally lifted, the clouds had separated, comes crashing down.
The bullet enters the back of Lincoln's head.
Booth stepped up to him, fired a shot from perhaps 3-4 inches, not right against Lincoln's head, but close, and it hit Lincoln in the back of the head like a sledgehammer would. This is the Derringer that Booth used on April 14th. It's about 6 inches long, weighs about 8 ounces.
A part of the Ford's theater collection, this instrument of history was Booth's personal weapon.
Booth probably had this weapon for at least 5 or 6 years before the assassination took place. It fires a single bullet, so this is like we say, one and done. Booth dropped the pistol, went to the front of the box intending to escape. Major Rathbone jumped from his seat. He grabbed Booth from behind and pulled him back from the railing. Booth twisted around in the major script, and for the first time the men were face to face. And Rathbone later said he was absolutely horrified by the look on Booth's face. And Booth was stronger than Rathbone was, so he was able to free himself and slash Rathbone with a knife.
Booth leaps from the box to the stage. And makes his escape.
What did you say?
Alright. Sex semper tyrannis, thus always to tyrants. Because again, from the Confederate viewpoint, they felt like that Lincoln was a tyrannical leader, and they felt like that the South again had the authority to leave if they wanted to. So he felt like that Lincoln was being a tyrant, basically.
Did the bullet go into his head or did it bounce like bounce
I think it got in.
sledgehammer?
I think it came. I don't know if it lodged. I think it might have lodged it because Lincoln died the next day. It wasn't like an instant death. It didn't go through his skull. But yeah. So again, early.
What did he die from? Like hemorrhaging?
I think it was probably blood loss and trauma. We're gonna talk about this a little bit later on. I believe it's Alexander Graham Bell tried to come up with an invention really quick to like fight. Yeah, it did get lodged because they were worried because the bullet was in his brain and they couldn't find it or get it out. Because surgeons didn't know. Yeah, they did not know what to do for him, and so he tried to invent it with some type of emergency like magnetism thing, trying to hopefully like pull it out, just because they didn't know what to do at the time to try to solve it. And that's why no one, at least in the video, and people at the time, they didn't really do anything, because no president had been assassinated before. They were all in shock of, you just did what? What happened? And so that's probably the reason why no one really knew quite what to do in the split seconds of it happening, just because they weren't ready for it.
Even if he did survive, he probably wouldn't have been there. He probably would have been brain dead, right?
Yeah, he would have died. I think he ultimately died from blood loss, if I remember correctly. But because the bullet was in there, they did not know what to do for it. Alright, Chris, you can get the lights again for it. Alright, really quick, moving forward just a little bit. So, Christianity and the Civil War. So, Christianity and religion, your book points out, have always played an important part in the formation of the United States. There's kind of like a little miniature revival that happened right before the Civil War. And so, your book points out that there were early revival movements, and particularly in the New England area, and then spread into the Midwest and into the large southern states. Your book points out one of the major people is D.L. Moody, or Dwight L. Moody. Make a name for him. He's going to stick around for a while. So, just make a note, D.L. Moody, Dwight L. Moody. Your book talks about him later. Alright, kind of interesting though, your book brings up this interesting thought provoker right at the beginning, kind of towards the middle of page 228, with why were the revivals unable to prevent the outbreak of the Civil War? So, if you're having a lot of people get saved or having a lot of Christians get revived, why did that not prevent the Civil War? Anyone think they want to say?
It was already in the making. It was already going to happen.
Okay, well keep in mind, if everybody gets saved, or if there's a lot of people getting saved, or a lot of Christians.
Save everyone.
Yeah, that's true. But in mind, if you're having a lot of revivals, why does it
doesn't say in the Bible slavery is bad, does it?
It does. Some places. Yeah, well, it prohibits man-stealers. There's definite remarks to that for it as well. Also, unfortunately, just because someone is a Christian, does that mean they're going to automatically live according to every biblical principle? No. And that is the sad thing about Christians, is that even though the Bible tells us how to live, Christians have to make a choice to live it. And unfortunately, Christians are still sinners, and they still sometimes make selfish, unfair decisions, and that's just part of life. That's one of the reasons why you want to grow in the Bible and pray and ask God to help you to make good decisions, because you want to live according to God's word and not just to what you want to do. Unfortunately, in this time period as well, some people felt like that slavery was condoned in the Bible. So Chris did bring it up a little bit. But sometimes people felt like that it was allowable or it was okay for it. Partly, now, two main ideas you get from this is because the Bible talks about, with the Jews in particular, the Jews were only supposed to marry within their own race. And that's a very clear taught thing in the Bible. Does anyone know why God was being so picky back in the Bible time, saying Jews only marry Jews, and in particular, even certain tribes only stay in certain tribes? Alright.
The mixing of blood.
Alright, so why was that, okay, so why would that be a problem back in Bible days? Just thinking it through.
I mean, people would probably discriminate, or maybe it would cause like diseases or something.
Okay, I think I know what you're getting at, but not quite. So who were the Jews supposed to represent on earth in the Bible times? God. Now keep in mind, who had not been born yet but was prophesied to be born of the Jews? That's the reason why Jewish bloodline was super important. What?
Did they follow that?
They followed a lot of cases because they knew already that it was going to be of the house of David, and it was gonna be a Benjaminite. So that's the reason why they kept very important records of whose house are you, because they knew that the Messiah would be born of David. So it was very important to know who's your blood. Now, you didn't have to be a perfect Jew, because the Bible also says you have to be of Jewish faith. There are several instances in Scripture where you had people become Jewish, not biologically, but it's the idea of they took on the Jewish faith. Does anyone know who was the lady that became Jewish, like of Jewish faith? And I believe she was David's grandmother or great grandmother. I can't remember which one. Does anyone know who that lady was in the Bible? We have a whole book about her. What? Habakkuk?
Yeah.
Not quite. A little bit further.
What's her name?
Not Esther.
What's her name, sir?
Ruth. So Ruth was a Moabitess woman. She basically converted to Judaism, married Boaz, and she is either the grandmother or the great grandmother of David. And so, with the idea, it's because the Bible isn't focusing on with the idea of race, but it's the idea of, okay, my people have to stay separate because of the Messiah, and then also they represented God on earth, and so because of that, he didn't want them mixing with other people, because he knew that if you married someone from another nationality, what would be the tendency to happen, Ethan? Okay, not so much like mixed blood, but what would happen like with
It would keep happening.
what?
It would just keep happening.
Alright, so not necessarily with the idea of like mixing of blood, but what would happen if you married like a regular Moabite person? Who did they typically worship?
Other gods.
Other gods. That's the reason why God was more focused on don't marry outside of the Jewish nation. Not necessarily because of bloodline, with the idea of, okay, you have to be of this particular race. It was the idea of, okay, it's unwise to marry someone of a different faith because you're going to get converted probably, or it'll cause marriage problems. Stay away from it. So God was making it clear, saying, okay, that's the reason, for the main reason of don't marry other nations. Not because of racism of I want a pure people group, because again, Moabite was in David's bloodline. So it's not like you had to be a pure Jew in that regard. But it's the idea of he didn't want you to be converted to other religions. Now, do we still have guidelines like that today in the New Testament?
Yeah.
Yeah, like the Bible says, the Bible says, be not ye unequally yoked together with an unbeliever. Not saying don't marry a lost person, but why is it problematic to marry someone who's not saved?
Because you can be converted.
Okay, I can focus on both of you at the same time. Okay, so say yours first,
You
Chris.
can be converted.
You could be converted and lose your. Now, keep in mind, you can't become unsaved, but you can be led away. And what's your? Did you have a different thought, Genesis? Yeah, and so it leads to a lot of other problems, like for example, where your kids go, like will they go to church? Will they read the Bible? Whichever church will they go to? So it's something to talk about with your significant other ahead of time to make sure you're both in agreement on it, and both of you understand what you're talking about. Particularly if it's really, really, really important to you, you want to make sure that they understand that. So again, the guidelines still apply, even though the Bible doesn't teach with the idea of racism, with the idea of one group is better than another group. In the Bible times, the Jews represented God, and that's why God was so picky about it. You also occasionally hear people talk about the curse of Ham, with the idea of the Old Testament and how Noah's son and grandson basically did something to dishonor him, and so because of that, Noah basically cursed not Ham but his son, saying he will always be a servant to the other brothers. He was talking about in that instance just saying you are setting yourself up to have trouble because Ham's kids, they went on to form all other people. They formed a lot of different people groups, like the Chinese, not just Africans. And so that's where sometimes occasionally you hear that, but that is misinterpretation of scripture as well. All right, do we have any questions about that? Because it is actually a really interesting thought provoker. All right, really quick. Great Societies. D.L. Moody, thank it up for him that he was a representation of the YMCA, and he spent much time witnessing to Union troops. He also witnessed to Confederate prisoners. Why do you think he ministered to Confederate prisoners? Ethan. And he got you. They understood, okay, you might be fighting for state rights and through that effect slavery, but you still need God. So because of that, we're going to also witness to you. He also witnessed to the freedmen as well, trying to help out with them and getting them saved too. Plus, a lot of churches were trying to help heal the wounds of the war, rebuild the country, return citizens to peacetime endeavors, and prepare the freedmen to enter society. Try to help out everyone as much as you can. I have about 5 minutes, so we'll review super quickly because I don't have a whole lot of time, but I want to get out of this section because I'm almost done. Alright, so if I don't give any homework. Will you still remember to study possibly for stuff for tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay, so everything up through this you need to know for tomorrow and make sure that you're studying. You
Are you
understand?
saying we're on paper tomorrow?
I'm saying you need to be studied up.
Yeah, but-
Ready to go.
So from the beginning of this chapter, or the beginning of this section,
I would probably say, if I were to give you a rough guess, 220 up to this page, but you need to be studied up, it might be a little bit past that, like before that. Okay, so thinking back over it though, thinking back over it, who killed Abraham Lincoln, Ethan? Good job, John Wilkes Booth, making over him. What?
Are you doing points?
You can track points. So, if you get it right, you get points. Alright, who was the king, so who was the king of France that was waiting for Great Britain to basically give support to the Confederacy?
what's the last name starting with?
There is no last name.
What is it?
Starts with N?
An N?
N.
Is it a weird name?
He's the third of this. It was a dictator.
Napoleon.
Yep, Napoleon III. Alright, who was the Union warship that was captured by, what was the British steamer that was captured by the Union? The Trent. What was the name for the Confederate warship that was made in Great Britain?
CSS Alabama.
Good job, CSS Alabama. What do you call the Fayette money that the North and South use to some
Green
extent?
bombs?
Close.
Greenbacks?
Greenbacks. Alright, let's see, alright, who was known, I think I talked through this super fast, there's one reason why I wanna go over it. Alright, who was known as the Rock of Chickamauga because he captured it? I know I went through this super quick the other day. Alright,
Let's start with.
his last name starts with a T. Remember?
T?
T.
It's a weird name.
Sort of? Sounds more like a first name. Okay?
Tanner?
Nope, not quite though. Alright, George H. Thomas, make it over him, he's at the top of page 221, I think I talked through this super fast the other day, so just going back to throw over it. So, George H. Thomas became known as the Rock of Chickamauga. Alright, who was known for the March to the Sea? So we'll go back to Genesis if nobody got it. Sherman. Alright, who was the Confederate general that was supposed to stop Sherman but couldn't?
Start with
H. What do you call the top part?
Hood.
Yep. Good job, Johnny. Good. Alright,
What do you call the bottom half of Columbus?
I was gonna say something like the top part of your hoodie, but I mean you got it
I'm gonna
anyway.
say downtown Columbus.
It was a good guess. I knew most of the generals, so I threw out one that started with an H.
Good job. Alright, so was Richmond ever officially captured?
Yes.
Yes, it was. Alright, what is the full date for the release surrender at Appomattox Courthouse? Good job. What was the most decisive battle of the Civil War? Watch the video about this today.
Gettysburg.
Gettysburg. What was the single bloodiest